June 25th, 1876. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, a day shrouded in infamy, rich with valor, and steeped in enigmas that have puzzled scholars ever since. But what if we could relive that day through the eyes of someone who stood on its bloodied ground? George B. Herondine wasn't just a witness. His story is a rare and intimate view into Custer's final campaign. Prepare to uncover the raw reality, the genuine emotion, and the gripping account of a confrontation that forever altered American history. Settle in. We're about to begin this powerful journey. And while you watch, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to help our channel grow. I've come across countless inaccurate reports about the Little Bighorn in various newspapers like the Herald. Much of it is deceptive, and the truth needs correcting. I stood with Reno throughout his involvement in the fight, and I know firsthand what unfolded before and after the clash. I didn't witness every single moment, but I observed plenty, and I'll share the events exactly as I experienced them. I was with General Gibbon's troops at the mouth of the Rosebud when Generals Terry and Custer arrived. General Terry allowed me to accompany Custer's column as it advanced up the Rosebud. He gave me this assignment inside General Gibbon's tent, and I met Terry again later aboard the steamer Far West, anchored at the mouth of the Rosebud. Terry inquired about the terrain in the upper Rosebud region and along Tulloch's Fork. I was on the front deck when I was called into the cabin, where Generals Terry, Gibbon, Custer, and Brisbane were gathered, holding a war council. Terry had a map in hand and asked for my insights into the geography near Tulloch's Fork and the Little Bighorn. From their exchange, I gathered that Terry was figuring out the best place for Custer's and Gibbon's forces to meet. Custer ascending the Rosebud and Gibbon traveling up the Bighorn. Since I'd traversed that landscape, I shared all I knew with them. Custer seemed satisfied and said he wanted me to accompany him. I returned to the deck, and shortly afterward, General Gibbon approached me with some words. General Custer then told me I was officially enlisted. I asked about my tasks and pay, and he said I would be serving as a scout. My job was to carry dispatches from the head of Tulloch's Creek down to Gibbon's position once we arrived there. We touched on my compensation briefly, and that was the extent of the crucial discussion. That conversation happened on June 21st. Soon after, General Gibbon departed the steamer. Later, I spoke to General Brisbane outside the cabin, asking where I might find his cavalry over the next few days. He expected them to be near the mouth of the Little Bighorn. At noon on June 21st, I reported to Custer and was placed under Lieutenant Varnum's command, who led a group of scouts. That's where I met Mish Boyer, the half-blood scout who was part of the unit. We set out on June 22nd around midday, heading up the Rosebud. Leading the way were Boyer and Bloody Knife, doing preliminary scouting, with Custer riding beside them. Varnum and his scouts followed just ahead of the main body. We marched about 12 miles and halted around 5 p.m. Custer ordered Reveille to sound at 4 a.m., with plans to resume the march by 5 a.m. on June 23rd. We broke camp on time and followed the stream for several miles until we encountered a trail previously used by Reno's men. We tracked it until 5 p.m., then made camp again. That evening, Custer dispatched Crow Scouts to scout ahead. At dawn on June 24th, we resumed the march, continuing up the same trail. Not long into the day, Custer, traveling ahead with Boyer, called me over and mentioned he might send me and Charlie Reynolds to scout Tulloch's Fork. I told him we weren't quite close enough yet and that we'd have to keep following the trail for now. I double-checked this with Boyer, who confirmed that in a few miles we'd hit a gap, and could cut across to Tulloch, roughly a 15-mile detour. Custer accepted the suggestion and said we'd wait. We hadn't gone far before the Crow Scouts returned in haste, saying the trail was looking more recent and that they'd found fresh pony tracks. They also brought back a human scalp, which was later identified as belonging to Stoker, a fallen soldier from Company H, 2nd Cavalry, likely killed days earlier near the mouth of the Rosebud. Custer halted the march, dismounted the troops, and gathered his officers. Though I wasn't close enough to hear the council, they spoke for about 30 minutes before we resumed, this time at a slower pace. Soon we reached Muddy Creek, the site of a skirmish the 2nd Cavalry had fought the previous spring with Lame Deer's band. As we crossed, I noticed signs that some lodges had diverged from the main trail toward Muddy Creek. I rode over to inform Custer, and he paused the column, dispatching Varnum to investigate. Custer emphasized he didn't want to lose track of any groups separating from the larger trail. While Varnum scouted, the troops paused for dinner. He returned 2 hours later and confirmed the side trail reconnected with the main path up ahead. We pushed on, and the trail became increasingly fresh. We passed several clustered campsites, clear signs the Indians were moving slowly, grazing their animals along the way. As dusk neared, Custer instructed his men to keep watch for any offshoots from the trail. His goal was to surround the entire camp and prevent anyone from escaping. That night we camped on the increasingly fresh trail. Custer sent Varnum, Boyer, and several scouts ahead to survey the area. He ordered the men to graze their horses, eat dinner, and be ready to move out at 11 p.m. We rested until 10 p.m. and then advanced. The darkness was near total, and we progressed slowly. After traveling roughly 10 miles, we stopped at 2 a.m., unsaddled the horses, and let the men and animals rest. The scouts returned in the night, reporting they'd found the village. At daybreak, we moved out again. Boyer and Reynolds had seen the encampment, and Boyer said it was the largest he'd ever encountered. Reynolds agreed, adding that the numbers were immense. Custer replied with confidence, "I can beat them." Reynolds warned that victory would require 6 grueling hours of fighting. On the morning of June 25th, Custer halted and tried to conceal his troops. He then rode ahead with an orderly to the divide, where Varnum and Boyer were watching the valley. He wanted to see the village from above. While he was gone, I trailed up the dry fork of the Rosebud, but hadn't gotten far before I spotted 2 figures crossing the hills toward the Little Bighorn. Custer returned after about an hour and a half, and Boyer asked if I'd seen any Indians. I said yes, it looked like it. Boyer informed Custer, who then gave the signal and summoned his officers. He handed out orders and divided the force into battalions. We advanced rapidly up the divide, covering several miles to reach its crest. Varnum and Hare led the scouts forward at a gallop, and the rest of us followed at a trot. I stayed with the scouts, and we followed a stream leading to the Little Bighorn. At the creek's mouth, we saw a solitary lodge. We circled and climbed a hill to gain a vantage point, but found the lodge abandoned. From the summit, we could see the valley below, huge dust clouds and animals in motion. A few Indians were galloping away. I shouted that they were escaping, and we needed to move quickly. Lieutenant Hare wrote a note to Custer, likely sharing our concerns. Custer was not far behind, moving at a brisk pace. The scouts tore open the lodge and found a dead Indian inside. Custer and Reno arrived as we were inspecting it. I heard Custer tell Reno to take the scouts and lead the advance. He'd follow closely. Reno spurred forward, telling his men to control their mounts. My horse stumbled, slowing me down briefly, but I rejoined Reno at the fort. As we crossed the river, I heard Crow scouts warning each other. "The Sioux are coming to fight." Understanding their words, I relayed the message to Reno. He paused, regrouped the troops, and crossed the Little Bighorn, forming a battle line on the open prairie beyond the timber. The maneuver was fluid. We advanced at a trot, then at full gallop. Ahead, a large group of Indians appeared to be waiting. We pushed forward half a mile. The Indians began burning the timber to our right and ahead. Some were already inside the woods, and we fired, but they didn't return fire. We then dismounted and formed a skirmish line facing the hills. The firing escalated quickly. The Indians attempted to flank us and encircle our position. We led the horses into the woods behind us. The men retreated into the trees, regrouping in a small clearing. I was among the last to enter and paused to shoot at several Indians trying to breach the timber behind us. Once inside, the troops remounted and formed a line. A sudden volley rang out. Bloody Knife, standing in front of me, and Reno to my left, were both hit. The volley killed Bloody Knife and another soldier who cried out in pain. Reno ordered us to dismount again, but quickly reversed the command. Many hadn't yet remounted when Reno led the charge out of the woods and onto the open prairie. The formation dissolved as everyone fled on their own. I followed, but dust obscured everything. My horse tripped, throwing me. I ran back to the woods and hid in the bushes. I heard someone yelling, "Halt, men! Let's fight!" The moment Reno's group left the trees, the Indians closed in from all directions. After losing my horse and returning to the timber, I ran into Lieutenant DeRudio. While we spoke, a dozen soldiers, some on foot, some mounted, arrived. I advised them to take cover with us and prepare to defend our ground. Just after we settled into position, gunfire erupted down the valley. Custer's command had engaged. We'd seen many Indians abandon Reno and race down the valley. The gunfire was heavy, distinct volleys interrupted by scattered shots for about 45 minutes to an hour. Then everything went silent. I turned to the men and said, "It's time to go." I felt the fighting had ended and suspected the Indians had won. We moved quickly, avoiding all but 5 Indians along the way, and reached Reno's group, which had formed on a hill. I got there around 5 p.m. From our position, we saw many Indians moving up the valley. Reno tried to move toward Custer's last known location, but the Indians forced him back. They launched a fierce attack that lasted until dark. On June 26th, the battle resumed at dawn and didn't let up until 4:01 p.m. Thirst plagued us, and 7 men were wounded trying to fetch water. I believe Captain Benteen's leadership saved the hilltop stand. We didn't know what had become of Custer until Terry and Gibbon arrived on June 27th. The force that attacked Reno on June 25th couldn't have numbered more than 200 warriors. I don't think anyone died before Reno pulled into the woods, and only 1 man fell on the retreat to the bluffs. Despite what you've heard, neither our horses nor our men were worn out. The troops were fresh, well-fed, and in high spirits when the battle began. We initially thought the Indians were running away, and our fear was they might escape before we could fight. I don't think Custer's battle lasted long. It probably ended within 2 hours. At one point, the gunfire was so intense we thought Custer was winning, and the Indians started breaking down their camp as if preparing to flee. The route from the Rosebud to the battlefield covered more than 100 miles. We marched 12 miles on the first day, 35 on the second, 33 on the third, and around 25 to 28 on the final leg. We left at noon on June 22nd and arrived at the battlefield by noon on June 25th. Unlike what many reports claim, Custer didn't wear out his men or push the animals too hard. A heavily loaded pack train kept pace the entire time. From my viewpoint, Custer moved with discipline, care, and professionalism. I hope this first-hand account sheds new light on the Battle of the Little Bighorn and the Great Sioux War. Thanks for watching Empire History Central. I look forward to bringing you more first-hand battle stories. Take care, and see you next time.